Thank you.
Good morning. And thank you, Captain Stardart, for that kind introduction. And an enormous thanks to the Center for Drug Evaluation and Research, Small Business and Industry Assistance Division, and our Center for Devices and Radiological Health Division of Industry and Consumer Education. It takes a lot of hard work and good energy to put together a conference like this one, and I want to recognize and thank everyone who was involved with organizing today's session. I'm delighted to be with you here today on behalf of our Commissioner, Dr. Scott Gottlieb, as you kick off 2 days of information gathering and what I know will be a productive and informative discussions on topics that are essential to the work that you do. America is a leader in global innovation for patients, putting our nation's entrepreneurial spirit to work by turning promising ideas into new drugs and medical devices to improve patient care and outcomes. It's an honor to join with so many innovative researchers, businesses, and others who are committed to the development of medical products that will help make a difference in the lives of so many patients. The focus of this conference is one that Dr. Gottlieb feels very strongly about. That's why he's made it a primary focus to ensure that the agency has the right policies in place to promote and encourage safe and effective innovation that can benefit consumers, and adopt regulatory approaches to enable the efficient development of these therapies and technologies. By taking an efficient, science, and risk-based approach to our regulation, FDA can promote health through the creation of new and beneficial medical products. The work you do is critical to FDA's efforts in this area and critical to our mission to protect and promote the public health. This is truly an exciting time for patients. We are involved in one of the most dramatic periods of scientific growth and medical advances in our history. Rapid improvements in our understanding of human biology and underlying mechanisms of diseases, coupled with the ability to store and transmit large amounts of data, holds great promise for the development of medical treatments and cures, and in turn, great hope for patients. I'm struck by the impressive number of participants, both those physically in the room today and those joining us virtually, as well as the different types of businesses and firms represented at this conference. It speaks volumes about the importance of the topics being discussed and your commitment to engage with FDA. It also serves as a reminder of the great breadth of today's medical product industry and an increasing global footprint, as well as the importance of FDA keeping pace with innovations as we fulfill our role as a regulator in the midst of such dramatic transformation in healthcare. We know that each of you face many challenges as you seek to marshal the promise of scientific advances into promising products. And we recognize that one of those challenges is regulation. FDA does not want to present regulatory barriers to beneficial new medical innovations that add to the time, cost, and uncertainty of bringing these technologies and therapies forward if they do not advance the agency's public health mission. Moreover, we understand that it can be difficult to identify and understand all of the applicable statutory and regulatory requirements that may apply to your products and to your firms. Therefore, our goal over the next 2 days is to help you better understand and navigate the regulatory process, which, at its core, is intended to protect and promote the safety and health of American consumers. Now, I'd like to spend a few minutes this morning providing a brief overview of some of the initiatives FDA is working on to advance medical product development and encourage competition across the product lifecycle. Many of these efforts are part of our work to align the agency's regulatory requirements with and implement provisions of recently enacted laws, such as the 21st Century Cures Act. As we consider new approaches and different ways to maximize the positive impact of our regulatory authorities, a few important underlying principles guide us in our work. These principles include embracing least burdensome principles in device pre-market reviews to help ensure efficiency and expedite the availability of new technologies without compromising scientific integrity. striving for clear policies and predictable regulatory pathways, making sure that our policies and regulatory approaches provide a level playing field for competition, using the best science so we maintain our gold standard for evaluating the safety and effectiveness of medical products, and standing ready to adapt our regulatory principles to the challenges we face in evaluating new technology platforms. Dr. Gottlieb outlined many of these priorities in his first days as commissioner and continues to prioritize the agency's efforts in these areas. As some of you may know, the commissioner has spoken about the importance of the early preclinical stages of product development, including how we are helping facilitate new technology platforms that are becoming the defining features of extraordinary medical advances, like cell and gene therapy, regenerative medicine, and other platforms that target the molecular and genetic basis of disease. Engaging with developers during the earliest stages of product development is critical to ensuring transparency about the pre-market review process. Our experience shows that earlier and more frequent engagement can help make the initial stage of development more efficient and increase the odds for approval. We know, for instance, that academic and individual medical sponsors, as well as startups and some small-sized biotech companies, sometimes don't have a full understanding of what it takes to get an investigational new drug or biologics license application approved by FDA. But it's often these smaller companies or individual researchers who are working with the most novel technology platforms. And so we want to do everything that we can to encourage very early meetings to provide early feedback to these developers. These efforts are a particularly prominent feature of the Office of Tissues and Advanced Therapies in CDER, our Center for Biologics Evaluation and Research. Increasingly, these meetings occur early during the period of non-clinical and preclinical work for an IND. It's been FDA's experience that some sponsors overestimate the amount of information needed to file an IND, and that too many of the costs of development therefore get front-loaded, increasing the cost of initiating new science instead of later in the development process when there's a better understanding of whether a new product has clinical promise. And FDA's review staff can also help streamline the early development process through a variety of means, including eliminating unnecessary preclinical tests, or by suggesting optimal preclinical or clinical designs such as more adaptive trials for early-stage research, simplifying statistical evaluation of results in early-stage clinical trials, and streamlining the design of clinical trials themselves. All of these approaches to preclinical scientific engagement are being made available to sponsors, and similar approaches are being adopted in our Center for Drug Evaluation and Research. Let me offer another important area where we are adapting our regulatory processes to help make medical product development more efficient and less expensive through the use of real-world evidence. Expanding the promise offered by real-world evidence is a priority of the FDA and of Dr. Gottlieb. The reasons should be obvious. It can help doctors and patients be better informed about the clinical use of new products, which in turn enables them to make more effective and efficient medical choices. And this ultimately will help us achieve better outcomes, as well as safer and more efficient uses of groundbreaking advances. Many of you may be aware of the uncertainty that can exist today among sponsors concerning the role that real-world evidence plays in regulatory decisions. That's in part because the breadth and reliability of real-world evidence is growing. And as it does, the opportunities for FDA to make use of this information increases as well. We are working to bring this important variable into the mix and support the development of and access to appropriate forms of evidence that can be relied on to meet statutory standards for approval and clearance. So how does FDA fit real-world evidence into our regulatory framework? And how can we translate that to you so that you know how to fit it into your submissions? To address these questions and to further advance the use of real-world evidence across our pre- and post-market review process, we have and will continue to issue guidance on the potential applications of real-world evidence for satisfying aspects of FDA's pre- and post-market drug and device requirements. As we consider new approaches to the use of real-world evidence and invoke the use of a broad range of sources of evidence in support of the underlying goal for informing the benefit-risk calculus for medical products, we will always be guided by FDA's gold standard for regulatory decision-making. As Dr. Gottlieb has pointed out, the evaluation of medical products is part of a continuum. As innovators and developers of medical products, you understand better than anyone that no product is entirely risky and uncertain one day and completely safe and effective the next. More simply put, you recognize that medical products may present benefits and risks. It is incumbent upon us, as the regulatory agency charged with the responsibility to make decisions about these products, that we articulate a clear standard. At the same time, however, our broader mandate as a public health agency gives us the ability to engage in and examine the life cycle of how products are used. And that means embracing that continuum of evidence that informs their clinical use. The promise offered by this kind of evidence is enormous. It can better inform our regulatory obligations about the benefit-risk profile of a medical product. And it can also provide earlier identification and a richer understanding of new safety concerns. Many medical products have been approved and cleared based at least in part on FDA's review of real-world evidence. But as a regulatory agency, we plan to provide more clarity on how such evidence can and should be used in regulatory decisions. Only with this clarity and transparency can innovators like you fully incorporate these concepts into medical product development. We've already begun to set forward some guidelines in this area. Last month, we issued final guidance on the use of real-world evidence for devices. Since early 2015, we have approved or cleared more than 8 medical devices and expanded the approved or cleared use of more than 6 technologies based at least in part on real-world evidence. This includes drug-eluting stents, transcatheter heart valves, and technologies for spinal cord stimulation, as well as certain in vitro diagnostics. In these cases, we're using robust evidence that often was generated in less time and at a lower cost than in the past, and in some cases, saving 1 to 2 years of development time. Increasingly, medical device firms are also meeting their post-market study requirements by leveraging real-world data sources. We're also now working on policies to support the use of real-world evidence in the approval of new indications for already marketed drugs. This may be especially relevant in settings like rare diseases or in other unmet medical needs, where it can be hard to enroll patients in clinical trials. And we're expanding policies to enable the use of real-world evidence to support post-approval drug study requirements. It's important to make clear that real-world evidence is not a substitute for other evidence, such as the traditional clinical trial data. But its use in appropriate context does offer increased opportunity to improve medical product development. FDA is fully committed to making sure we have the policies in place to promote and encourage safe and effective innovation that can benefit patients and consumers, while employing regulatory approaches to enable the efficient development of these technologies and products. By taking an efficient, risk-based approach to our regulation and setting clear and consistent policies, the agency will help to foster competition and reduce barriers to innovation. We want developers like you to invest in and create more new and beneficial technologies and therapies so that patients have safe and effective products to address their medical needs. Importantly, by making sure that our own policies and tools are modern and efficient, we can also reduce development costs and times for these innovations and give entrepreneurs like you increased opportunities to develop the essential products that can provide enormous benefit in people's lives. We look forward to working closely with you so that you can be more efficient, cost-effective, and ultimately successful. And we also look forward to working with and hearing from you as we continue to revise, strengthen, and make our regulatory approach more transparent, beneficial, and efficient. Thank you for your time and for the work that you are doing on behalf of patients. I hope you have a very productive conference. Thanks.